What's up, guys? This is Bobby Douglas. Welcome to another video. As you guys know, yesterday on Saturday, the NCAA Selection Committee released their initial top 16 seeds based on the action we've seen thus far in college basketball. I decided it would be fun to take that bracket that they gave us and go through it March Madness bracket pool style, giving you guys picks for each potential matchup that we could see in the tournament and ultimately crown a pre-national champion, if you want to call it that. We have preseason All-Americans, right? So we should have pre-March Madness champions, and that's what I will give you today. And then stay tuned because later this week, I will be doing a deep dive on the team I picked to win it all in today's video, and you won't want to miss that. So make sure you're subscribed, make sure you have notifications on, and if you like the channel, please leave a like, leave a comment. So yeah, let's get right into it. So we have the 16 teams here, and let's dive first into the West region. Before we get into the West region, just two things really quick. I currently am in this weird classroom seminar building at Notre Dame, so if my voice sounds a little bit echoey, I apologize for that. And two, I might be trying to rush through this thing because I'm not even sure if I'm allowed to be in here. It's like 9 o'clock on a Sunday, and this door was just open, so I just walked in. So, whatever. I may be trespassing, but anything to deliver March Madness content. But anyway, here we are with the West region. We have Gonzaga taking on Texas in the Sweet 16. This will be a 1 versus 4 matchup. This happened early on in the season, and Gonzaga kind of killed Texas. If these two teams were to play again, I don't really expect anything different. I think Gonzaga would kind of wipe the floor with Texas. I don't think Texas really has the offensive fluidity. Texas is a very defensive-oriented team. They don't really like to get out and run. I think Gonzaga would push the pace on them. And overall, I just think their offense would just be too much for Texas to handle. I would say Gonzaga wins this one probably by 15 to 20 points. And then in this 3 versus 2, this is a very good matchup. We have Illinois and Duke. I would take Duke, but I really like Illinois. Honestly, I could see 3 out of these 4 teams getting to a Final Four in this region based on matchups. So I like all 3 of these teams. I think this was a pretty loaded region that the committee kind of rolled out here, but I would take Duke over Illinois. I just think Duke, with this overall athleticism and strength of that top 5 that they have, it would be Keels, Wendell Moore Jr., Paolo Banchero, Mark Williams, and A.J. Griffin. I just think that's a little bit too athletic for Illinois. I do like Trent Frazier for Illinois. I think they have a lot of key shot makers, does Illinois, but I think Duke will be a little bit too overpowering for Illinois, and they would go to the Elite Eight. And in the Elite Eight here, we get a rematch of that late November game between Gonzaga and Duke. Gonzaga being the 1 seed, Duke being the 2 seed. Duke beat Gonzaga by 3 when they first played. I don't think that would happen again. I think Gonzaga would beat Duke this time. I think the matchup between Mark Williams and Chet Holmgren would be really, really fun to watch. I think Duke definitely has the athletes to kind of hang at Gonzaga's pace, as we kind of saw in their previous matchup, but I just think overall, I would trust Gonzaga's offense a little bit more than I would Duke's. Duke, to me, is a really good team. I just worry about their experienced guard play. So I think because they lack that, Keels is a freshman, Jeremy Roach is only a sophomore. I would take Gonzaga just because I like their guard core a little bit better. I like Andrew Nembhard. I like Rasir Bolton. And, I think Gonzaga is a little bit more experienced of a roster. And so I would have them beating Duke, even though Duke beat Gonzaga earlier this season. So Gonzaga would be my first team moving on to the Final Four from the West region. Okay, we now go to the Midwest, where we have Auburn, UCLA, and then Texas Tech, Purdue. I think Auburn is a little bit overblown based on their record, and they're starting to come back down to earth a little bit with losses to Arkansas and then Florida yesterday. UCLA, they were my preseason national champion. They were a 4 seed in the selection preview. They haven't been healthy all year, but in this one, I would take Auburn to beat UCLA. UCLA is one of the worst teams in the country at getting good shots, and good shots in this sense means at the rim or 3-pointers. Obviously, if you're hitting mid-range shots at a high clip, that's a good shot too, but usually for most teams, it would be at the rim or 3-point attempts to constitute of a high-value shot. And per shot quality, UCLA is bottom 10 in America in terms of getting their shots at the rim or from 3, so they take a lot of difficult shots. And remember, last year during their Final Four run, that was a key thing with them. They hit a lot of difficult shots, especially Johnny Juzang. And so they could do it again this year, but I don't really think that would happen 2 years in a row. Auburn, I just think, is a lot more consistent offensively. I really like their perimeter defense with K.D. Johnson, Allen Flanagan, Walker Kessler, obviously. I've talked about him in previous videos, but he is just a stud. Best shot blocker I've seen in college basketball, probably since Anthony Davis back in 2012. And then obviously Jabari Smith, he is the ultimate weapon offensively just because he can get his shot whenever he wants. So I think in terms of reliability offensively, I would give the edge to Auburn here. So I'll have Auburn beating UCLA, my preseason national champion, is eliminated early in the second weekend here. And then we have another game, Texas Tech and Purdue, another very interesting game. Purdue, one of the best offenses in the country. Texas Tech, one of the best defenses in the country. Really could see Texas Tech's defense just getting after Purdue's guards. I love Jaden Ivey, obviously. Eric Hunter, Isaiah Thompson, they're all good. But I do think they can be a little bit turnover prone, and they tend to force the issue when things aren't going well. Texas Tech, they're just so solid. I really like Bryson Williams. He's emerged for the Red Raiders this year. And really, Texas Tech hasn't been fully healthy all year outside of maybe a handful of games. If they get their full roster back, so if they get Kevin McCullough back fully healthy, TJ Shannon back fully healthy, I think this would be a team that could be really dangerous. I really like Adonis Arms in the backcourt for them. And so I would have Texas Tech beating Purdue here. I trust Texas Tech's defense more than I trust Purdue's defense. And ultimately, I think Purdue, while they're a really good team, I think they're pretty schemable in terms of knowing how to beat them. If you just front the post and maybe get one of those two big men in foul trouble, I don't really think Purdue likes being physically challenged. And so I think Texas Tech would kind of make not easy work of Purdue, but I think they would find a lot of matchups that they would like. And so I would have Texas Tech moving on to beat Purdue, which sets up an Auburn-Texas Tech Elite Eight matchup. And I would also take Texas Tech to the Final Four here. Auburn, I think, has been playing with fire a little bit too often. They've had a lot of close calls. You're starting to see them drop a few games, which can be a good thing. But overall, I think I trust Texas Tech's personnel a little bit more than Auburn's. I think Auburn's guards maybe are a little bit too volatile for me. Wendell Green and Katie Johnson are awesome when they're on. I do worry about their overall game management and if they can slow it down and kind of keep their composure. Meanwhile, Texas Tech, I think, is one of the more steady teams in America. They never get phased. They're never out of games due to that defense. And so I would take Texas Tech to beat Auburn here and get to the Final Four. Okay, South region here, we have Arizona Province and then Baylor, Tennessee. Honestly, if I'm getting this region in the tournament, I'm probably looking at the 5 seed to make a Final Four run here. I'm not really a huge fan of any of these teams. But to play this game fairly, we have to give these four their due. Arizona Providence, I would take Arizona pretty easily here. Providence, I would be shocked if they actually get to the second weekend just because if you look at all the metrics, all the analytics sites, shot quality, Ken Pom, Bart Torvik, it's pretty clear that Providence has been like the luckiest team in America. They win all their close games, but that means they're in a lot of close games. And if they're really that good of a team, they shouldn't be, beating Butler in overtime as they did today, which that was a game I was at, by the way. But, I just think Providence, they can play up to anybody, but they can also play down to anybody. And a team like Arizona, where they want to speed the game up and get as many possessions as possible, I think that would ultimately wear down Providence. I really like Providence's players. I like Al Durham, I like Jared Bynum, I like Nate Watson, I like AJ Reeves too. But I just don't really think they're as good of a team as they're seeded here. It actually wouldn't surprise me to see them drop out of the top 16 seeds come Selection Sunday. But regardless, I'll take Arizona here. And then in this game, it's Tennessee-Baylor. Honestly, both of these teams are just, I'm not really a huge fan of either of these teams. Baylor primarily just because they're so hurt right now and they don't really seem to be getting healthy. LJ Cryer's missed a bunch of games. Adam Flagler's missed games. James Akinjo. Jonathan Chamba is out for a year now with that knee injury, which was gruesome, by the way, which sucks because he was probably one of my favorite players to watch in college basketball. He's just such a great kid. But, Baylor, Tennessee, I think, assuming Baylor is healthy and assuming they get their 3 guards back, assuming Matt Meyer is kind of going the direction he needs to go, Flo Thamba, I think, has been more than serviceable, in picking up the slack for Jonathan Chamba. Tennessee, I just don't think they can really score, at all, and, neither can Baylor really, but I do trust that Baylor's offense and experience would kind of beat Tennessee here. And Baylor, it's weird. They have a top 15 offense in America if you look at the efficiency metrics. But just watching them, they don't look like a top 15 offense. Tennessee, very good defense, but their offense, it's just every single time, every year, man, I swear to God, it's Tennessee. Hey, Tennessee's got a good defense. Tennessee, they've got some pretty decent NBA prospects. Tennessee, they got a very athletic team. And, Tennessee, they can't make a shot for their lives. I think they probably lead the high major schools in scoring droughts of 3 or more minutes. It's just unbelievable. If you watch their game against Arkansas yesterday, I think they were up by 2 with 8 minutes left, and they ended up going on a 5-minute scoring drought and ultimately losing that game. So, as much as I want to like Tennessee, I think I would trust Baylor more here, and I would take them to move on. And then it's Arizona-Baylor. This is another weird game because I don't really like either of these teams going this far, but if this is the matchup we're getting, I honestly would probably take Baylor just because I think their experience is a little bit more meaningful than Arizona's. Remember, Arizona, they don't have a single guy, I think, who has played in an NCAA tournament game. Tabelis hasn't, Krisa hasn't, Matherin hasn't. Koloko maybe has, but, not a lot of tournament experience on that roster. I think Baylor with Flagler, LJ Cryer, Flo Thamba, Matt Meyer, they have guys who have been in these moments before. And I think Baylor would do a really good job kind of getting under Arizona's skin. And I think they would bother them defensively. Arizona obviously is prone to very erratic runs. They give up a 10-point run. They will go back and score on a 10-point run. Whereas Baylor, I think, is a lot more steady. And I would kind of prefer the steady than I would the erratic in this case. And so I would take Baylor to get to the Final Four. But, let me make this clear. If this is an actual region in Selection Sunday, that's going to be a pretty tough bracket to fill out. But I'll take Baylor here coming out of the South. And lastly, we have the East region, Kansas, Wisconsin, and then Kentucky, Villanova. This first game, Kansas, Wisconsin, I kind of like both of these teams. Kansas, I think, has Ochai Agbaji, and Wisconsin has Johnny Davis. So that would be a really cool matchup to see, 2 first-round picks, probably same position in the NBA, kind of going at it. I think overall, though, Kansas would have a little bit more talent outside of Agbaji to get the job done against Wisconsin, even though I like Wisconsin as a team this year. But I think when it comes down to the ancillary pieces of both rosters, I would trust Kansas's more. I think Christian Brown's a phenomenal player. Jalen Wilson has been great as of late. I think DeJuan Harris has been good. I think Joe Yesufu, the transfer from Drake, can provide super important minutes off the bench for Kansas. I do worry about them inside, but in terms of this Wisconsin team where they have a lot of guys who will pick and pop and they don't really play through their bigs as they have in the past, I don't really think it would be that big of an issue for Kansas in this game. And, I like Wisconsin's roster. Johnny Davis is obviously a stud. He had another great game today against Michigan. They were home, but that game was memorable for other reasons. But, I just think Kansas has a little bit more talent outside of their star to get the job done against Wisconsin. And then in this game, Kentucky, Villanova, again, like both of these teams, but I do think Kentucky is the better team. The way they've been playing recently is downright scary. Kellen Grady was on a heater yesterday. I think he hit 6 threes. He had one where he wasn't even looking at the ball. It hit him in the leg. He picked it up, shoots it, it goes in. And they beat a very good Alabama team without their starting backcourt of Ty Washington and Severe Wheeler. So I think that's impressive. Oscar Tshiebwe is right in the thick of it for National Player of the Year. Leads the NCAA in rebounding. Villanova, I do like Colin Gillespie a lot. I think he's a very good player, very good point guard. But overall, I think Kentucky, again, just has so many weapons that I don't really think Villanova could keep up with them. I do think Villanova could make this difficult for Kentucky just by playing slow, not beating themselves, and maybe trying to get Kentucky either in foul trouble or just getting them to make stupid decisions because that's what Villanova seems to do to everybody. But I do think at the end of the day, this Kentucky team is legit, and I would have them beating Villanova. And then we get a Kansas-Kentucky rematch. We saw that just housing of Kansas at Allen Fieldhouse by Kentucky back in January. And I think the score might be closer, but I would still take Kentucky to beat Kansas here. And that wraps up our Final Four. Okay, and now we have the Final Four, Gonzaga, Kentucky, and then Texas Tech, Baylor. Going to Gonzaga, Kentucky first. I think this would be hell of a matchup. Very evenly matched teams, I would say, overall. I do think, though, Gonzaga would get the best of Kentucky here. Again, I think this Gonzaga team is kind of built to win just because they do so many things well. They shoot the three well. They defend at a high level. They play super fast. And I just think that will ultimately wear down some of these teams. Kentucky, I think, could play at their pace, but I do think the offensive talent is a lot more consistent. So I would have them beating Kentucky and going to the national championship game. On the other end, we have Texas Tech and Baylor, and Texas Tech has swept Baylor in the regular season, and I really don't think it would be different in the Final Four here. I would have Texas Tech beating Baylor, which sets up a Gonzaga-Texas Tech title game, a rematch of that 2019 Elite Eight game, which saw Texas Tech go on to the Final Four. In this one, though, I would take Gonzaga. These teams also played earlier in the year, and Gonzaga won by, I believe, 12. Texas Tech did hold Gonzaga under 80 points, which is a pretty rare thing to do. But I do think, again, at the end of the day, I think good offense beats good defense. And that's not always the case, but I do think in this regard, I think Gonzaga just has a lot more consistent production offensively than Texas Tech would in this game. And so I would have Gonzaga beating Texas Tech here, and they would be my national champion, which means later this week, be on the lookout for the Gonzaga video. We're calling it the Zaggin' Wagon. You got to get on the wagon right now because Gonzaga, I think, is going to win it all this year. Obviously, we still have a month to go. A lot of things can happen in terms of injuries and stuff like that, but right now I think Gonzaga is the best team in America, and be on the lookout later this week for the Zaggin' Wagon. It's going to be a deep dive into the Zags, and I will ultimately be making the case that Gonzaga should be your national title pick. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you later this week for the Zaggin' Wagon. Thanks.